Assalamualaikum and hi. We from Group A1 will discuss Marx's theory of history, relating it to the earlier ideas of Darwin, theory of evolution and natural selection, George Hegel, dialectical process, and Ludwig Feuerbach, philosophical materialism. My name is Dewi Emilia Fazira binti Zaidi, and my tutor number is 26413. The early socialist critics of classical economics preached dramatic reform. The objection to capitalism and its alleged evil was moral. For example, utopian socialists did not think that violent revolution should be used to change the capitalist system. They did not believe that any form of class struggle or social revolution is necessary for socialism to emerge. Instead, they used moderate ways to persuade the capitalists to combat poverty and equalize the gap between rich and poor. In other words, utopian socialists wish to modify classical liberalism, not overturn the system that supported it. Karl Marx, the leader of Marxian socialism, dismissed that approach. Marx shared the early socialist moral outrage against contemporary capitalism, their sharp criticism of classical political economy, and their socialist vision of future society. However, he believed that socialism would not be forthcoming until the conditions of the working class deteriorated to the point of open rebellion. He believed that capitalism had internal contradictions that would ensure its eventual demise. Marx articulated a comprehensive critique of capitalism as well as dialectical process by which capitalism will be overthrown, theory of history, and law of motion. Karl Marx believed that social revolution was unavoidable within advanced capitalist countries. He and his compatriot Friedrich Engels advocate that the workers of the world unite to hasten this event. Next, we move on to Karl Marx's biographical details. He was born in Prussia and the son of a successful Jewish lawyer. He studied law, history, and philosophy at the universities of Bonn, Berlin, and Jena. He received his PhD from University of Jena at 23 years old. University positions were close to Marx because of his radicalism. He then turned into journalism, was exiled from Germany, and went to Paris, where he studied French, socialism, and English political economy. He met his collaborator and financial supporter Friedrich Engels in Paris, and together they wrote the Manifesto of the Communist Party in 1848, and then he exiled to London in 1849 and spent the remainder of his life there. Tormented by illness, extreme poverty, and the death of 3 of his children, in infancy Marx continued to study, write, and organize. He wrote many articles in the New York Tribune whose payments helped him subsist. In 1867, he published the first volume of his magnum opus, Capital Das Capital. He then died on 14 March 1883 and was buried at Highgate Cemetery in London. After Marx's death, Engels edited his manuscripts and published Volume 2 and Volume 3 of his work. After Engels died, the remaining manuscripts were left to the leading Marxists of the time, Karl Kautsky, who published another 3 volumes of Marx's writing under the title Theories of Surplus Value. Marx's theory of history provides a framework for analyzing human society and the laws of its development. In developing his theory of history, Marx was influenced by David Ricardo classical school, early moderate socialists, which is, for example, Christian socialism and utopian socialism. Next is Darwin, theory of evolution and natural selection, Hegel, dialectical process, and Feuerbach, philosophical materialism. The objective of this assignment is to discuss Marx's biographical details, the intellectual influence on his writing, Darwin, Hegel, and Feuerbach, and Karl Marx's theory of history, the relation of production ROP versus force of production FOP, and sixth stage of society development in Karl Marx's theory of history.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. So next slide is slide number 8. We have intellectual influences, which are Charles Darwin for theory of evolution and natural selection. Second, George Hegel, which is for dialectical process, and third is Ludwig Feuerbach, which is for philosophical materialism. So Charles Robert Darwin, he is an English naturalist, geologist, and biologist, also best known for his contribution to evolution theory and natural selection process. His famous book is On the Origin of Species by Means of Natural Selection in 1859. He is born in Shrewsbury, which is in England, on February 12, 1809, and died on April 19, 1882. He also born into a wealthy family as the fifth of 6 children. He studied medicine at the University of Edinburgh in 1825. He encouraged to become a doctor but fascinated with the natural world. He sailed to the Galapagos Island in 1831 on a 5-year voyage aboard the HMS Beagle. Second is Darwin for theory of evolution and natural selection. So Darwin, according to Darwin in his famous book, which is On the Origin of Species, first, in the struggle of existence, favorable variation tend to be preserved and unfavorable ones destroyed. So species survive through a process called natural selection. Species that successfully adapted to meet the changing requirement of their natural habitat thrive, while those that fail to evolve and reproduce become extinct. So natural selection causes population to become adapted or increasingly well suited to their environment over time. The result of natural selection was evolution of species. Darwin observed and collected evidence to support his ideas about how life changes over time. The world's animal and plant communities are dynamic, not static. They change over time with new forms originating and others becoming extinct. So evolution is gradual. Changes arise through slow and steady environmental changes. Sudden changes challenge a species' ability to adapt. All organisms descended from an original and common ancestor. Then over time, the process of natural selection has created different species, each specifically adapted to its ecological niche. So here we have diagram. So first, a population of mice has moved into a new area where the rocks are very dark. Due to natural genetic variation, some mice are black and some others are tan. So some mice are eaten by birds. So tan mice are more visible to predatory birds than black mice. Thus, tan mice are eaten at higher frequency than the black one. Only the surviving mice reach reproductive age and leave offspring. So the mice who leave offspring will reproduce and giving next generation, which is because black mice had a higher chance of leaving offspring than tan mice. Of the next generation contains a higher fraction of black mice than the previous generation. We have George Hegel. His full name is George Wilhelm Friedrich Hegel. He was born on August 27, 1770 at Stuttgart, Germany. His school at Stuttgart Grammar School, and then he proceeded his study in theology at Tübingen University in 1793. Then he became a professor at the University of Heidelberg, and then after that he's become a professor of philosophy at the University of Berlin at 1880 until his death.
Good day, madam. My name is Devapra Rajakumar and my metric number is 267560. I'm going to explain about who is actually Ludwig Andreas von Feuerbach, who was from 1804 and 1870 until 1872. Actually, he is a German philosopher and also anthropologist. He also studies become a student of philosophy under George Hegel for 2 years at Berlin, and he also has received his doctorate at the University of Erlangen in 1828. He was published a very famous book which is The Essence of Christianity, which was published here was 1890, and also provided a critique on Christianity and strongly influenced all generation of later thinkers including Karl Marx. Okay, now I'm going to explain about philosophical materialism in terms of Feuerbach. When you want to see what is materialism, it's actually referred to the matter, which is the real thing of the world of reality, and also the real arm of ideas, which is called as idealism. And so the second one will be between reality and a fantasy. His book Essence of Christianity. It has been very much clear. The book is convey about the reality and also the fantasy. And the third one will be he is argued that God is really a creation of man, that the qualities of people attribute to God are really qualities of humanity. They are very believe in gods, and also the individual create unreal deities and the worship these deities as if they supernatural. In reality, the product of human is an imagination. Okay, according to Feuerbach, religion which bring unreal happiness for people need to be abolished to get real happiness. Other than that, let's we move on for the influence of Darwin, Hegel, and also Feuerbach on Karl Marx's idea in developing his theory of history. Okay, when you want to see, Marx sees similarity between Darwin, evolutionary, and natural selection. As you know, the idea is like something his own idea on this political economic. For Marx, current organizational relationship in the economic, like such as current biological organism, are a result of past changes. And also, Marx's perspective that dynamic as opposed to static analysis is actually the root of the true understanding of the society. Okay, next will be if you know, the Marx also accepted Hegel's notion of a dialectical process within history, which has three steps of process that are thesis, antithesis, and also synthesis. What are the meaning of thesis? Okay, thesis is something opposed by a contrary idea, and also antithesis is something like interaction between the produce a new idea, something like that. Okay, synthesis, which like how to say the become of new thesis, like creating like something new thesis. However, Marx replaced Hegel's idealism with modified vision, and also the vision of it is called as philosophical materialism. And he had agreed with Feuerbach that history consists of the process through which people accept the reality through use of their sense of preparation. And also Marx also believes the fantasy. Okay, now we are going to know about Marx's theory of history. Let's see what is his theory of history. Theory of history, which is Darwin theory of evolution and natural selection. Hegel's dialectical process and Feuerbach's materialism to develop his theory of history. If we see there's a like hierarchy, which is superstructure, relations of products, and also forces of production. Okay, now let's see what are the explanation for that. Okay, if we see for FOP, which is force of production, which is the hierarchy from highest to the lower. FOP is a kind of dynamic continuously changing the ROP, which is relations of productions, which we can call as rules, property relation, social relation among people are really static. Okay, for Marx history, the process of ROP is actually called as a thesis. And also for FOP, actually it's named as antithesis, and also ROP is synthesis. The mechanism for overthrowing old society is the class struggle. Okay, now let's see the last one. Okay, the ROP, which is reinforced by the superstructure. What is superstructure refers to? Superstructure is actually refers to art, philosophy, religion, literature, music, and also political thought. And also relations of production. As we see here, they have a table here. What are relations of production? Rules, social relations among people, property, relation. All the elements of superstructure maintains the status quo. Thank you.
Good day, Doctor. My name is Dinsha Madhavan and my metric number is 268045. So, today I would like to continue my presentation from Theory of History, which there is 6 stages of society development. Karl Marx saw society evolving through 6 stages. First is primitive communism, second is slavery, third is feudalism, fourth is capitalism, fifth is socialism, and the last stage is communism. Stage 1. Primitive communism. There were no antagonistic classes, no exploitation, and no class struggles. People held land in common ownership and jointly cooperated to wrest a measure, living the nature. The efficiency of production was very low, and thus workers could not consistently produce surplus beyond the subsistence needed by themselves and their dependents. They worked together in order to survive. Example of primitive communism is the society of Native Americans before arrival of Europeans. Before the arrival of Europeans in the 15th, most plains tribes lived in villages along rivers and streams. Stage 2, which is slavery. Considered as the beginning of class society where private property appears. The efficiency of production rose to the level where workers could produce more than their own subsistence. Slavery became profitable and exploitation and class conflicts rise. Agriculture sector became better. People learned to cultivate plants and rear animals on a large enough scale to support large population. Citizens own more than personal property. Land ownership becomes especially important during a time of agricultural development. Slavery permitted a higher development of production forces of society, but eventually it became a barrier to further progress. Slaves were not the most highly motivated workers. Slave rebellions shook society and tore this stage apart. From a Marxist perspective, slave society collapsed when it exhausted itself. Stage 3 is feudalism. During feudalism, there are many classes such as first at the top is kings, then lords, then followed by serfs, and then some little more of slaves. The state is ruled by monarchs by inherit their position or through marry or conquer their ways into the leadership. Marx stated that feudalism stage is unique because the exploitation of the serf is mostly clearly visible. In the feudal system, serfs were allowed to work a few days per week on the land assigned to them but were forced to work the other days on the lord's land. Feudalism brought a higher development of society's forces of production. The system finally limited further progress and it was overthrown and superseded by capitalism.
Assalamualaikum and hi everyone. My name is Nur Ainishwada binti Samsudin with matrix number 263160. So I'm going to continue presenting about the stage 4 of Karl Marx theory, which is capitalism. So this capitalism is actually replacing feudalism. So although Marx hated capitalism, he paid tribute to the great increase in productivity and production. So he paid a lot to increase a great production and also for a great productivity. He paid a lot for that. So under capitalism, there are actually two main groups, which is the working class and so-called proletariats, and also the second class, the second group who own the means of production, such as who own the owners of the factories and so-called capitalists. So at this stage, workers are wholly dependent upon wages, and the capitalists are dependent upon money invested to create more money. So the workers only dependent on the wages of after they work, they got the wages. They only depends on that, while the capitalists depending on the money they invest to get more money. So the capitalists will invest more money to get more money to get more money instead. So capitalists will only pay the workers as little as they can. So in fact, they only pay just enough to keep the workers alive and keep them productive. So the techniques of production become increasingly concentrated and centralized. So by the means of they doing this, they paying the money, they paying the wages. So this leads to the technique of production become really concentrated and centralized to what they actually know how to do. So the system of private ownership of capital actually becomes a barrier to further progress their ownership, and the to actually this system of private ownership of capital actually becomes an obstacle to actually improve the capitalism. So at this stage, unemployment increase and causing the workers to revolt. So actually, at the end of this, the working class success to overthrow the capitalism and establish its own dictatorship of the worker, and going to the next stage called socialism. So stage 5 is socialism, where this stage is between capitalism and communism. So according to Marx, capitalism faced class struggle and contradiction that inevitably would lead to its being overthrown and replaced by socialism. So this is according to theory of history and law of motion. So the working class, in overthrowing the bourgeois state, will establish its own dictatorship of the proletariat to destroy the bourgeois class. So at this stage, again, under socialism, profit motive and free market were eliminated as a major guiding forces for the economy. So they eliminated free market and profit motive production to actually helps forces increasing of the economy. So at this stage, socialism is from each according to their ability to each according to their work. So that means they are grouping the workers to according to their ability and according to their work. So, and then this leads to stage 6, the communism. So communism is actually an extreme form of socialism. It's similar to socialism. Communism is similar to communism, but communism is similar to socialism, but in more extreme way, where socialism aims to set up classes, moneyless, and stateless society. So this time, they aim to set up a classes without money and without society, without stateless, and that means stateless society, where this process continues until finally the state withers away and pure communism prevails. That means no more state, no more no more higher ups and lower downs. That means no more classes in the society. So this time communism is the form of each according to their ability to each according to their needs. That means they group people according to their ability and also according to their needs. So there is no more land owners and also no more slaves like that. So this time in communism, the government owns everything and is responsible for providing equally for all. So here comes the conclusion. Marx's theory of history provides a framework for analyzing human society and the law of its development. Marx were actually influenced by three um, three three people, which is Charles Robert Darwin for its natural selection, and the second one is George Hegel for the dialectical process, and the third one is Feuerbach for its philosophical materialism in developing his theory of history. So for Marx, history is actually a process through which the static relations of production thesis and comes into eventual conflict with the dynamic forces of production antithesis. So this time conflict revolutionizes the system so that new relation of productions, synthesis and new thesis permit the higher development of the process of production. So the mechanism of overthrowing all society is the class struggle. So, so the process of throwing all societies is called the class struggle. Um, for a conclusion, overall, Marx actually saw society evolving through 6 stages. So the first stage is primitive communism, where there is no classes, no conflict. Then comes to the second stage, which is slavery, and involving slave owners and slave as the lower down, and I mean as the lower down, that means is being ruled by the slave owners. And the third stage is feudalism, which is the serfs being ruled by the landowners. Means the serfs are serving the landowners. So the fourth stage is capitalism, where bourgeoisie is ruling the proletariat. That means proletariat is working to serve the bourgeoisie. So the fifth stage is socialism, where the workers are serving the state managers. So that means the workers is being paid by the state managers for their work. And even eventually the socialism part, they will only pay as possible. So that means it is not equal to what they actually work. So at the end of the stage, communism. So there is no more classes, no more conflict. So that's the end of the Karl Marx theory. That means at the end of the stage, that here comes the communism, where there's no more classes and no more conflict. So that's all from me. Thank you.